Hi, and welcome back to Fishing with David Pyle. I'm coming to you from my living room today, just a different way to deliver videos to you. In this video, what I'm going to cover is your tune-up, early season tactics, and what the current conditions in the river are for spring Chinook fishing on the Willamette River. I always consider late February to be about the time when fish will show up, and of course it depends on what the river conditions are. So I'm speaking to you right now at a time when we still have a few weeks left before we expect the real push of fish to come through, but there can be some opportunities, and I'll explain that in the current conditions section. So let's start off talking about tune-up. It's March 2nd. I won't do any guided trips or my guided education trips until about March 15th. But before I do that, I get my boat in the water. I test out my gear. I make sure that everything that I need is available to me and in my boat. And that would be, do I have lures, mooching rigs, lead, dropper lines, bumper lines? Make sure I've got a backup rod ready. Make sure that all my reels have had brand new spooled line on them. Making sure there's a net in my boat. Making sure that my batteries are charged, that all my electronics works properly. So going through and testing everything in your boat. And the best way to do that is to really drop your boat in, and even if it seems like you're pretending to fish when the conditions aren't great, you're giving yourself an opportunity to get the cobwebs out from last year when you were in a great rhythm, and fishing became pretty rote for you. I'm like that. My first couple trips out, I'm a bit rusty. It takes a while to knock the cobwebs out for me. So I can imagine doing thousands of trips that I've done that you're not going to be an exception from that. So tune-up is also that time, early season, when there's not a lot of boats out, is a good time to go out and observe, look for people that fish every year, we'll call them regulars, and I'll be out there as well, and watch and see how they're fishing, see what patterns they're running, how fast they're trolling, attempt to see how much lead they're using. Are they using triangle flashers or 360 flashers? Are they using plastic? Are they using bait? Are they using herring, cut plug, herring, full whole herring, or perhaps prawns or sand shrimp? So we have a pretty diverse fishing environment, and different parts of the river might use different baits in the early spring. And again, the super baits and spinfish are no exception. That in the past, maybe those were not used in the early spring. It was pretty much cold water early season using bait. In this case, I think we're seeing more and more plastic rolled out earlier. So that's an option that you'll have to consider. But back to tune-up, just making sure you've got everything in order for your boat, and make sure that you go out, run some patterns, get snagged up on the bottom a couple times, and remember, hey, I've got to watch the rod tips very closely in the Willamette River because it can be snaggy. Get yourself back in that rhythm of fishing. Absolutely critical. And again, there's educational elements to go out and watch people like the Sultan or Underdog at the head of the channel go down into the channel, and there's expert guides working down there, maybe up at Oregon City, Milwaukee. Look for those hot spots that tend to have the early fish caught, and watch the experts that work that area. They're there every year. They're out to catch an early springer, and they don't mind getting skunked, and they don't mind spending their time tuning up. So man, I can't tell you how important that is. So let's on to the second piece, which is early season tactics. So water temperatures being cold, water conditions being dirty. We need to consider a lot of things about when to fish, when it's appropriate to go fish, and how to fish, what lures, what gear, what flashers to use. So we'll start first off with when to fish. And when we have a big storm, and we expect that we're going to have dirty water, muddy water, in those muddy water conditions, if it's too dark, you don't want to waste your time fishing in it. So there's a turbidity. I believe NOAA publishes a turbidity. I can get that to you guys. I'll put that on the screen so that you guys have a link to it. But knowing when turbidity gets to a certain level, then your bait becomes visible to salmon, and otherwise it might be the water might be so dark that you really don't want to expend energy or time fishing in the Willamette River. So knowing when to fish, knowing water temperatures, understanding how to fish in cold water temperatures, and fish behavior. And these are certainly things I talk about in my guided education trips. It's really critical that you understand fish behavior seasonally. In the early season, salmon are lethargic, so it's going to be optimal for you to fish as slow as you possibly can, your trolling speed, whether that means you throw bags out, whatever it is, you're going to go so slow that your bait, say a herring, is probably going to have a really small and slow roll on it. But you need to make sure that that's rolling, number one, and number two, you need to make sure you're going super, super slow, because those fish are not going to expend energy chasing bait, chasing after your trolling speed. So your tactics can be throwing bags out, going as slow as your kicker motor can possibly go, perhaps flipping around and trolling into the current rather than trolling with the current. So take that into consideration, number one, and that will continue until water temperatures warm into, say, the low 50s, and then you can start trolling a little bit faster and more downhill with the current, because those fish are going to have a little more energy, a little more chance of actually going after your bait instead of being lethargic and going, I'm not going to expend the energy for that. So knowing that piece, then on to what kind of flashers roll best in slow trolling conditions. And you can go without a flasher. That's one option. You can use a triangle flasher, which will actually rotate in super slow conditions. And that's why it's become, in past years, the favorable flasher to use in cold water early season. And then you can use a 360 flasher, and some of today's 360 flashers have different options, drilled holes at the top, which will allow it to roll in slower conditions. But generally speaking, 360 flashers need more velocity, so your trolling speed has to be higher to get them to rotate, and therefore it's not the preferred flasher for early season. But I would say people are using them earlier and earlier, and you might turn into the current, and because you have current hitting your boat, that resistance could possibly get your flasher to roll for you. And I might experiment with that this year, but I'm generally a triangle flasher guy. Put a herring behind it. That could be a hole or a cut plug. You can use prawns. You can use sand shrimp up in areas above, say, Selwood. Most of the river below Selwood is fished with herring. Above Selwood is, like I said, prawns are used there regularly, sand shrimp, And up at Oregon City in April-ish, sometime in mid-April, you're going to start to see eggs and sand shrimp, and that's a back trolling, which is a slightly different style of fishing. But that's just kind of a quick heads up on bait, which I won't go into too much detail on right now, but plan to have some herring. You can throw anchovies out. I like cut plug or whole. If I'm using anchovies, I'll run them whole. And I've had a lot of success with whole herring. Just never think for a moment that everything has to be a perfect cut plug herring that's going to catch the most fish. I'll run 2 cut plugs and 2 whole herring, and a lot of time it'll be hit on whole herring. But cut plug works just as well. So having them both out there might give the fish something different to look at. And I would say even experiment with, we have 2 rod endorsements that can be purchased after March 1st. And if you can have 2 rods in the water and you have 2 people in your boat, say run different baits, run a prawn, run a cut plug, a whole herring, and run something plastic, a spinning fish or a super bait. I think that you want to throw as many things out there as you can and see what the fish want. And once they bite on something, then maybe you start to transition and lean into that more of that bait or that lure for the rest of your fishing day. But every fishing trip, I would start off with a pretty diverse set of gear. Give yourself a chance to catch something. So 360s will really perform best once water temperatures rise and you combine a spinner or a super bait behind that 360, but I don't usually start that transition until about 52, 53 degrees in water temperature, and we're still below 50 right now, so take that into consideration. And as I said, you do need to troll faster for those 360 flashes to roll properly, so plan accordingly. Right now, you should be going as absolute slow as you can go. Okay, number 3, my final point I want to talk to everyone about, the current conditions. So every year we have these huge storms, and we'll see the Willamette River rise. It turns chocolate, and it's a real ugly brown. Not fishable at all. I think it was up beyond 40 turbidity just a couple days ago, and it's dropping, and as of this morning it was about 18. So it still needs to come down. I would say when it reaches about 12, you can get out and start fishing it. And some fish are going to be caught because we had a big storm, and certainly some Chinook salmon came in with that storm. And once the water starts to drop, the fish tend to hold. That's in their nature. And they hold at these spots, as I might have mentioned earlier, maybe down in the channel, the head of the channel, Selwood, Oregon City, Milwaukee. And those early season hot spots are places you might want to focus your energy. But going back to that turbidity level, when the water's brown and it just starts to change colors to green, there's some fish are going to be laying in there, and they're going to get caught. So each successive storm is going to bring fish in until we're about, start to peak in the late March, early to mid-April. Then the fish really start to roll in, and we expect a higher catch rate. But right now, expect to get skunked. I'm expecting to get skunked, but I'm willing to go out there. For one, it's tune up for me. 2, it's just, getting my bearings and getting back in the water and figuring out where snags are on the river. And I love to be out fishing on top of everything else. So for me, I don't mind getting skunked, and I continue to educate myself, continue to talk to other people on the river and ask them for advice, ask them how they're fishing, what's been successful. And I'm always available for people that are trolling by me to ask me questions. I'm absolutely happy to help you. I can't catch all the fish in the river, and I kind of feel like people have helped me out for years and years. To this day, I still have a great network of advanced fishermen and guides, and we all work together. They help me, I help them, and sharing information is a really fun part of fishing. And I really have lost the ego element of fishing. I don't catch fish to, send a picture around to everybody on the planet that I know, going, yeah, I got this fish. I'm well beyond that. I'm just excited to catch fish and watch people in our system catch fish. So if I can help you, I'm going to help you. And then with that said, I would expect in the next 2 or 3 days, we're going to see the color change and the water dropping on the Willamette River. Again, it's March 2nd. So March 3rd, March 4th, there might be some effort out there to catch fish, and I suspect that some fish are going to get caught. Again, expect to get skunked, kind of a needle in a haystack until we get maybe a little warmer water temperature, get further toward that end of March, middle to end of March, when fish are going to actually come through in more significant numbers. But that's what I have for you guys today. Leave me a comment and let me know what you think of this format. It is much different than being out on my boat and showing us catching fish. I'd like to hear from you guys. And just note this, being a professional fishing guide, I especially last season, I was so busy that my time to make videos really got slammed. I didn't have time to put the video together, to edit it. I just had enough time to come home and take my cameras and load that stuff on my computer and just leave it there. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to produce as many videos. I hope that this year I'll be able to manage that better. I know it won't happen at Buoy 10 because that's an everyday fishing, 13-hour days every day, really long, hard days for me. But through most of the spring and early summer fishing, I'm hoping to get some videos out to you guys. So stay tuned, and hopefully you guys have some comments for me. Maybe you have some questions, and I can sit down and do another session and answer some questions that you may have out there. Have a great spring or season. All of you that have supported my guide business and my guided education business, I want to thank you guys, and please send referrals to me. And if you want to go out on a guided trip with me, I will be happy to get a date together and book you. So again, stay tuned, and we'll see you next time on Fishing with David Pyle.